Okay, whoa.
Hello.
It's book club time.
It's book club time. Welcome, as per usual, to Lucy and Angel's Midnight Book Club. We are your hosts, Lucy and Angel. And
Hello.
this month we bring you gay, we bring you werewolves, we bring you devastation. We bring you Wolfsong by TJ Klune, the first book in the Green Creek series.
The first book in the Green Creek series, and boy howdy.
Boy, howdy, is it a fucking shot start. That man says we're gonna start in all capital letters, bold, italics.
He said, "You're gonna have a time."
You're going to have a time with this series. I'm setting the tone for you now, so you know what I'm trying to do. And boy did he. Boy did he.
Boy, did he. So yeah, this
Oh,
is
goodness.
I don't know, for reference, TJ Klune has written lots of other books. The House on the Cerulean Sea. Um, oh, there's one about something about Under the Door. I've never read that one. Um, but I did read The House on the Cerulean Sea, which is also a 10 out of 10 book. He writes a lot of queer stuff because he is a queer author, which I love. Um, the Green Creek series has 4 books total. This is the first one. We will probably eventually read the rest, but we're starting obviously with the first one. Although theoretically, I don't think you technically have to read them in order, but it probably makes more sense to. It is werewolves. All of the books revolve around werewolves, which is my cup of tea. I love werewolf stuff. And also it's gay, so it's like an added bonus.
That's fine.
It's got a really cool, diverse cast. Like I said, I've the other stuff I've written of TJ Klune I've really liked. So this is also for clarity's sake, this is not my first time reading this book. I have already read this book once. This is Lucy's first time reading this book. So
And
that
boy, do I
was
have things. I have things inside.
it was fun to see Lucy's reactions, as someone who has like hindsight when rereading it, um, to like see someone else go through everything for the first time. So that's fun. Um, but yeah, we're gonna do our non-spoiler review first. Lucy.
Then we'll get into all of the nitty gritty, gory details of the spoilers later.
Yes.
Um, Basically, what Angel is trying to tell you is Angel's trying to tell you that you should read this book, and then when you're done, make your friends read it so you can laugh at them. That's what Angel's trying to tell you, because that's exactly what this was. I had so much fun, as much as I did cry, because this book has a lot of emotional things that occur in it. It has a lot of ups and downs, we'll say. And when they are down, they are down. They are down. So I did cry a lot, but I take crying as a sign of like, this book got an emotional reaction out of me, and I respect the author for doing that. Though, is it that hard to make me cry? Not really, but that's besides the point. TJ Klune is a really, really, really wonderful writer. I'm excited to read more of his things. Because I've never seen a writing style like his. The way he breaks things up in his writing, and the way like he goes like line by line for things, is really interesting to me, and I haven't seen anything like that before. And I quite liked it. I found it quite entertaining. It was a really nice show of like our main character Ox, his train of thoughts. And I love being in Ox's head. I think Ox is a really, really good, compelling main character. He is so good. I love him very much. Um, but the story and the pacing of it, somehow TJ Klune balances it very well. There is a big big like span of time in this book, and he somehow balances it without it feeling like an absolute total drag of like, oh my god, things are moving so slow, time is so slow, while also having like really really fast paced moments that happen like in the fucking blink of an eye. TJ Klune somehow balances it all very well, and it doesn't feel too whiplashy, you know? He does it really well, which I appreciated. I was a little afraid. The longer I went into this book and the more like fast-paced things started to happen and then it started to really slow down, I was worried that it was going to feel very whiplashy, but it really didn't. Um, I had a good time. There's a lot, not a lot, but there's a good amount of humor in this book. And the humor balances like the really like dramatic, like emotionally charged things that occur in this book. The humor is such a wonderful little beacon of light in this book. um, all of the characters were really, really compelling to me. I cared about every single one of them. There wasn't a character I didn't like, except for our antagonist, who we will absolutely discuss. Um, but all of the characters I cared for. I cared about every single one. There wasn't one that I didn't like. Each one had their incredible qualities while also feeling very human in their own nature, that they still had their own flaws and they had their own problems and all of that good stuff. Um, and speaking of antagonist, God, TJ Klune can write an antagonist. He can write a villain, because the antagonist in this book is probably the scariest villain I've read about in a fantasy series for a while. The antagonist in this book is skin crawling. He made my stomach turn. Um, TJ Klune can write a fucking antagonist really well. I'll say that. That is for damn sure. Um, this book was great. I had so much fun. As much as I cried, and as much as me and and Angel need to fight for making me read this, I had a lot of fun. And
Listen.
I would read it again. And I want to continue this series. But me and Angel have to fight about it.
Listen.
Fight about it first.
I I was this book is it is emotionally devastating, and I will spoil this much. This book has a happy ending, so like if you are someone who doesn't like books that end in tragedy, or like you just prefer a happy ending, I am a bitch who likes a book to have a happy ending. I'm willing to endure angst and hurt comfort and like the emotional devastation if it means that the characters come out on the other side um with a happy ending, which like there's books I take issue with because of that fact. This book though in particular, it is emotionally devastating. And there is okay, that's technically kind of a spoiler, so I'm not going to say that. But there's a lot of basically the whole back end of the book is a lot of emotional turmoil, and like it is like a heavy read. And I all I told Lucy was like, it's really good, it's gay, it's got werewolves, it is like it's there's a lot of emotion when you read this book. And I didn't give specifics, and I when I tell y'all I was being threatened. I Lucy was sending me videos of her crying in the middle of the book. Um like it was bad. I was not affected as affected this time reading it. I was rereading the very ending right before we started recording, and I was tearing up because the last like 50-60 pages are brutal. They are brutal. Um so if you want to read it, I would recommend looking up trigger warnings, just because there is some mentions of things that maybe people wouldn't want to read. But this is a book that like I truly can't recommend enough to people. It is so good. It's fun. It's got a lot of silly parts. It is so TJ Klune knows how to evoke emotion from an audience, and it's done in a way that does not feel um like cheesy or gratuitous, or that it's just being done for the sake of it being done. um like, the one thing I cannot stand is tragedy befalling a character just for the sake of the tragedy happening and it not being plot relevant or doing something to further the character's growth. And that is something TJ Klune does very well. All, like, anything that happens to these characters, either from a meta perspective serves the plot, or from a character perspective it pushes these characters to grow further. And I really love that because it drives me insane when something bad happens to a character just for the sake of it happening. And I think TJ Klune does a very good job of not doing that. Um, I think he does a very good job of writing relationships that feel very real, um, even amidst like the magic of the book, and there's werewolves and witches and like all of this stuff that's happening. But the relationships between the characters, and I don't just mean like the main romantic pairing, which is Joe and Ox. I don't even mean just between them, but between all of the characters as a whole, whether it's friendships, romantic relationships, familial relationships, parental relationships, like um they're all super well written. They feel real. They feel like real people, and I think that relatability is really what drives the emotion in the book too. Um I just realized we didn't really say what the book is about. So
Oh,
maybe we should go over what the book is about.
we should, we should
Um,
probably do such a thing.
a brief summary.
Um, would you like to do it or shall I? I can do it if you'd like. The summary on the back says the Bennett family has a secret. They're not just a family, they're a pack. Wolfsong is Ox Matheson's story. That's how I've been saying his last name.
That's also how
Oxnard,
I've been saying it.
exactly. Oxnard Matheson was 12 when his father taught him a lesson. Ox wasn't worth anything and people would never understand him. Then his father left. Ox was 16 when the energetic Bennett family moved in next door, harboring a secret that would change him forever. The Bennetts are shapeshifters. They can transform into wolves at will. Drawn to their magic, loyalty, and enduring friendships, Ox feels a gulf between this extraordinary new world and the quiet life he's always known. But he finds an ally in Joe, the youngest Bennett boy. Ox was 23 when murder came to town and tore a hole in his heart. Violence flared, tragedy split the pack, and Joe left town, leaving Ox behind. 3 years later, the boy is back, except now he's a man, charming, handsome, but haunted, and Ox can no longer ignore the song that howls between them. Also, by the by, it says it on the back of the book. The Green Creek series is for adult readers. Adults. Um, So, yes, this book is about Ox. He is the main character. We're in his head the whole time. Um, and he's a wonderful main character. I love him very dearly. I've said it
Mm-hmm.
before, I'll say it again. And it's about him meeting the Bennett family and how they really, really, really change his world in every possible way, good and bad. They take it, like, they sweep him up and take him on this big journey, basically, and it is such an emotionally like harrowing ride, but it feels so beautiful. It is a very found family trope kind of book, and I am in fact a sucker for a found family. I always will be, forever and always. And it is done so beautifully. It feels so natural and it feels very right, for all of them to come together the way they do. uh and yes, Ox, he's swept up in the werewolves and the journeys and everything, and it certainly is a journey in more ways than one.
Yeah, so the book is mostly just about Ox meeting this family of werewolves, and he kind of just becomes caught up with them and their lives, and they become very intertwined. And Joe especially, and just like the progression of their relationships. And then like obviously the description alludes to like big bad happening, and then the rest of the book is kind of like the fallout of that and how things like that can affect those relationships and ties with people. So that's kind of like a general gist of what the book is about. um Ox is I think a wonderful main character. He's so human, like in the sense that so it feels strange saying this because this is like a point of issue for him, but like there is nothing exceptional about him, I guess, maybe is what I would say. And I don't mean that on like a deeply personal level, because that's not true, but from a reader perspective, he lacks a lot of things that make up like a chosen one trope. He's not like a genius, and he doesn't have magic, and he literally is just a guy.
He's just a guy. At the end of the day, he's just a guy.
He's just a guy who's kind of had like a shit hand dealt to him in life, because of like some stuff at the beginning that we know about. And you know, he has community, and then he meets the Bennetts and he has more community, and you know, all this stuff. But there's never he's not arrogant about any of it. He's not like, you know, like I said, he's missing a lot of like a typical kind of chosen one trope character, which I don't think he necessarily is a chosen one trope, but there is some stuff that happens later that is very akin to like a chosen one trope. But just as a whole, like as a protagonist, he is very human and like real, and like it doesn't feel like there's like an untouchability about him. He's very relatable in a lot of ways. Um, you know, he's trying to navigate these things on his own, and seeing him grow, because like the book starts when he's 12, 13, and then goes till he's 20 something, 26 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, we get to see this growth happen, and it's really interesting. And um there is like some trauma related things in this book for both Joe and Ox, and I think it's interesting the way that Ox's is kind of addressed, especially as time goes on. There's one particular line or one particular thing that was said to him that he comes back to all the time. Um and I think that's interesting, and to see how when this comes up for him, how he like approaches it changes each time that it comes up. Um I know you mentioned pacing. One thing that I like about this book is it feels like it's almost split up into acts. And I really do like that. Like we have the first act where everything's kind of being laid out and all this stuff, and then the big bad happens, and that's like the second act. And then Joe comes back to town, and that's like the third act. And I really like the way that it feels like it's split up that like that. It doesn't feel like it makes it so that each section I feel like has its own time to kind of develop and stew and really sit with the reader before we move on to like the next part. And I really like that about the way this is written, especially considering it's like 500 pages. Um, so it's a little bit lengthy of a book, but it doesn't feel lengthy necessarily. There is at the back half, there is like some pacing things that I feel like could have been sped up. There's like arguments happening that I feel like take longer than they should have to be resolved. But otherwise, I really like the pacing of this book. I love the way TJ Klune writes. It is so like immersive, and sometimes it's really visceral. Um, and like you really feel what the characters feel. Um, and yeah, it's I don't know. This is a book that I really love. I loved it the first time I read it. I loved rereading it. It's one that I would recommend to people a lot. If I had to give it a non-spoilered rating, I would give this like a 9 out of 10 or a 4 out of 5. whatever your rating scale of preference is. It would be either it would even be like a 4.5 out of 5. If it wasn't for the pacing issue towards the end, it would be a 5 out of 5 for me.
I do. I think I must agree. I loved this book. I had a lot of fun. It was emotionally devastating to me, but I did have so much fun. It was just a ride I really, really enjoyed. And I think I give it probably like a 4 out of 5 as well. I think this is a very near perfect read. Um, the pacing at the end, where like the arguments keep going and going, does kind of knock it just a hair, but it really isn't that much. But yeah, I would say probably a 4 out of 5 or like a 9 out of 10, whatever you would like to rate this as. That's my rating. I loved this book. It was a good goddamn time. So that's our non-spoilery section. If you don't want to be spoiled, get out.
Get
Now,
out. Get out of here.
the door is over there and you can leave. We have complimentary snacks in the lobby. Spoiler time. A book has never made me cry this hard in the middle of it like this one did. The middle of the book, crying, sobbing, hysterics.
Okay,
Fucked up.
before we get there, we gotta start from the beginning. So,
I just
to
needed the
do
people to know.
to do a more in-depth recap of the book, it opens with Ox, and it opens with Ox's dad leaving. So it's Ox and his mother and his father, and they all live in Green Creek. And at 12 years old, his dad leaves. And he doesn't really say anything, and this ends up being like financially not great for either of them, or for her. It ends up not being financially great for Ox's mother, who now has to take care of a 12-year-old by herself. But there is a line the line that he ends up sticking with him for the rest of the book. Let me see. I shrugged. Wasn't the first time he'd said that to me, even though Mom asked him to stop. It was okay. He was my dad. He knew better than anyone. You're gonna get shit, he said, for most of your life. This line is pervasive through the entire book. Ox comes back to it like time and time again, and like I said before, it is very interesting to see how he hold on.
Brief intermission.
It is very interesting to me to see how he approaches it each time that it does come up. Anyway, fuck Ox's dad. Me and all my
Fuck
homies
Ox's dad.
hate Ox's dad.
Deadbeat.
Very quickly, we get introduced to Gordo, who runs the local like mechanic shop in Green Creek. He seemingly has known the family for a while because he knows the family because Ox's dad worked at the shop. And when he finds out about when he finds about him leaving and how financially ruined it had left his mother, he offers to give Ox a job like under the table and to help pay their debts. Ox has been working on cars like since he was like 4 or something. So he's really good at it. Gordo gives him a job, and Gordo basically becomes like a father figure to him after this. And really helps him through things and keeps him employed for him and his mom's sake. There is a scene that I think is really funny at the beginning, where this is where he's finding out, Gordo is finding out about the money issues. And basically he's like, I'll pay for the debts and then you'll work for me to pay off, what I loaned you, basically. He gave my mom the money to get the mortgage caught back up. Said it would come out of the pay he'd given me under the table until I could legally work for him. Mom cried. She said no, but then realized she couldn't say no, so she cried and said yes, and Gorder made her promise to tell him if it got bad again. I think she thought he hung the moon and might have tried to smile a little wider at him, might have laughed lightly, might have cocked her hips a bit. She didn't know that I'd seen him once with another guy when I was 6 or so, holding his elbow lightly as they walked into the movies. So I this becomes relevant information for later, but I think it's so funny that Ox is like, my mom's trying to hit on this man, and I know that this man is gay.
That is a gay man. I know what you are.
Literally cracks me up. Also, more foreshadowing that I didn't catch before. So there's a scene at the end, towards the end, when the big bad is happening, but I just realized that a character from then is mentioned right now at the very beginning. Mr. Fordham, who cannot, like, he can't afford the parts or whatever needed for the car, and Gordo is just like, I'm just gonna fix it anyway. So that's interesting.
Shit, actually, that's fucked up in a way I can't explain.
We'll get there. Sorry. Ox meets the first of the Bennetts, which interestingly enough is Mark. Mark is Joe's uncle. And he seemingly knows Gordo, and basically he runs into him at the diner. They have a discussion. Mark seems kind of intrigued by him. Ox finds out, I keep saying Joe. Ox finds out that they live in this big house, like at the end of the lane of the road that him and his mom live on. So there's that. And then like a few weeks later is when he meets Joe. Now Joe is our other main character. I'm gonna say this now. There is an age gap between these characters. Personally, I think it's whatever. I think some parts of the internet would probably have an issue with it. So Joe is 10 and Ox is 16 when they meet, and they do become romantically involved much, much further down the line when they are both adults. I think it's whatever, but I just throwing that out there for anyone who might care. So he meets Joe, and this kid is immediately like enamored with Ox. He thinks Ox is like the coolest thing in the world. He just wants to be friends with Ox. He is immediately like kind of protective of Ox when he takes Ox home to meet his family. And his family consists of, so the Bennett family consists of Elizabeth and Thomas, who are married, and then their kids, which is Carter, Kelly, and Joe, and then Mark also lives with them. When they go over to the house, a line that also comes back a lot is Joe running up to his mom, talking about Ox, and he says, Mom, you have to smell him. It's like I don't even know what it's like. I was walking in the woods to scope out our territory so I could be like Dad, and then it was like, whoa. And then he was all standing there, and he didn't see me at first because I'm getting so good at hunting. I was like, rawr and grr, but then I smelled it again, and it was him, and it was all kaboom. I don't even know. You gotta smell him and then tell me why it's all candy canes and pine cones and epic and awesome. And this line comes back and is used in the most foul ways. TJ Klune.
TJ Klune, the fucking man that you are, derogatory.
He weaponizes the English language in a way that is so devastating.
It's fuck. It's deplorable and despicable. Um, my God. And so, after meeting Joe and then meeting the Bennetts, they all really start to crowd around Ox and like kind of start to really take him in, and they invite him over for Sunday dinner and all of that. Also, Sunday dinner being a tradition, that is also used in a despicable, foul way towards the end. Fuck TJ Klune for this. But like they invite him over for dinner, and they're really starting to become friends with him. And Carter and Kelly are the two older of the Bennett brothers. They are about Ox's age. I know Carter's about his age, and Kelly might be a little bit younger than him, but they all really start to like bond and become friends. And Joe is still attached at Ox's hip. And then Ox's birthday rolls around, and Joe gives him a gift. And the gift is this little stone wolf. It is like a carved stone wolf in a little black, like velvet box with a little blue, I think it's a blue ribbon tied on it. Um, and, Ox is like, this is really special. Like, I can feel that it's really special, and I have nothing to give you. And Joe just says, like, this is enough. This is all I could ever want. Take it. And so Ox takes it. And that little stone wolf is very important. Very, very important. Because we all later learn that that little stone wolf is very important to the werewolves. And it's given to someone very special that like you want to be with forever. And Joe gave him that at 10 years old. He knew right then and there that Ox was it, which devastating. Ooh. And Ox is like hanging out. He's having a blast with the Bennetts. And then Gordo finds out, and he's like, you can't go over there anymore. And Ox is like, who the fuck are you to tell me what I can and cannot do? And he's real for that. Because like at the end of the day, Ox is like what, 16, nearing 17, and Gordo's trying to like dictate what he's doing, who he's making friends with, and Ox doesn't fuck with that. And Gordo's like, you have no idea who these people are. You don't know. I want you to be safe. Blah, blah, blah. But he's keeping it really vague. He's keeping it very nondescript. He's just telling Ox, like, he can't do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that I think honestly I feel like that's Ox's biggest frustration is fucking Gordo is just like, well, you can't be friends with them, and Ox is like, well, why? And Gordo's like, you just can't, and it's like
because I said so.
you cannot tell. First of all, as much as Gordo is a father brother figure to Ox, he is not his mother or father. And also Ox is like 16, 17. Like, you're not gonna tell a teenager, well, you can't be friends with someone with not a real explanation. Like, there's no way.
Mm-hmm. And so Ox is like, I'm gonna keep being friends with him. Suck it. And Gordo's like, all right, but I fucking tried to tell you. I'm still gonna try and like stop it, but whatever. And they all like they meet during the summertime because Ox's birthday is in August. So they meet during summer, and then school starts back up. Carter and Kelly are at Ox's school, and those two do not leave his side. They crowd on him. Like when they sit at lunch, they sit on the same side as him. They don't sit across from him. Same side, which is crazy.
One on each side. So up until this point, Ox doesn't know about the werewolves, but the Bennetts have kind of strange habits. So there's a thing of them always touching him, not inappropriately, but like a hand on his shoulder or ruffling his hair. Or Kelly and Carter are always sitting like on either side of them, pushing like their shoulders together. There's like a lot of emphasis on touch, and they have a tradition of Sunday dinners with the whole family, which includes Ox, and like eventually his mother also joins. So they're, plus they sometimes they let things slip, like Joe will accidentally let slip that he needs to like check the territory or whatever. Um,
Literally, Carter says, "But he's Pac," and and Thomas, who is the dad, is like, "Shut your mouth."
so also for reference, so Thomas is the alpha of the Bennett pack. Um, and okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So Ox is hanging out with them more. There's like a brief weird jealousy thing that happens because Ox goes out with a girl who is one of the shop guys. So the other guys who work with him at the shop, it's Chris, Tanner, and Rico. And they are also like brother figures to Ox. On Ox's 16th birthday, he can work at the shop legally now. And Gordo gives him his own work shirt with his own name on it. And it's all very emotional and very sweet. And, you know, Ox has a really strong connection with the shop guys and with Gordo, as strong as he has a connection with the Bennetts. So that was his other birthday present. That was the birthday present from Gordo and the shop. After that, there's a weird brief jealousy thing because Chris's younger sister Jessie asks him out, and he goes and he forgets to tell Joe that he has to miss Sunday dinner to do it, and Joe is like upset, and like this persists throughout like most of their relationship because of the age gap and because of like the werewolf stuff. Whatever, they sometimes have like a weird back and forth thing with it. This is one of those moments. So after that, like not that long after that, I'm trying to remember. Let's see. I'm trying to remember why Gordo tells him the secret. I think it was because it was Joe's first shift.
Mm-hmm.
So
It was a full moon.
It was a full moon, and it's Joe's first time shifting. Because they don't. It's not like a from birth thing. Like he's a born werewolf, but like the shift doesn't start happening until a little bit later. Like a puberty thing. So the only reason that anyone tells Joe about the werewolves or anyone tells Ox about the werewolves is because it's Joe's first shift, and there is no way he's gonna get through it without Ox being there. So they tell Ox the secret. Ox is kind of just like, yeah, okay. Like, obviously he has questions, but he's kind of just like, yeah, I guess so. This makes sense to me.
The best part about this book to me is because so many people learn the secret. They're all just like, yeah, okay. No one fucking questions a goddamn thing. They're just like, yeah, all right. This makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they're like, all of these clues were there, like the way the Bennetts are so touchy, the way Gordo's weird about certain things. They're all like, you know what? We should have seen the signs. We should have known. And if, like, that might be the only, like, step out of reality for me of, like, I would be bombarding these people with questions. I would never let them know peace. Just question, question, question constantly. But everybody's like, yeah, okay. And they don't say a word. And it's the funniest thing to me. It cracks me up every time it happens because it happens just about every time, except with one character. And that would be Miss Jessie. Miss Jessie slays. But back to like the thing about like Ox learning about the wolves and everything, he has to be there for Joe because when you have magic like this, you can and will lose your humanity and you will just go insane. And to not do that, you need to have what's called a tether, which is something that keeps you like grounded in your humanity, just brings you back to earth, really. And Mr. Gordo did not tell Ox that one, he's a witch, and two, Bennetts are werewolves, but also three, Ox is Gordo's tether. And, they're like, can somebody even be like two people's tether like that? Is that even possible? And, Ox is like, well, God damn it, I'm going to try. We're going to try for Joe. And so, Ox comes to help Joe and like brings him back down to center and, tells him everything's going to be okay and that he's right here. And that's when the tether is formed through those two. So Ox is now two people's tethers. And Joe shifts. All of the Bennetts are wolves. It's a happy, good time. Gordo's there, and he's just like, "Yeah, man, I told you it was weird, huh?" And Ox is just like, "What the fuck is happening right now? I am a teenager in high school. What is going on?" And he's just like, "Well, all right. I guess this is my life now. I love these people. They care about me. They love me. They are basically my family now. So I guess this is just what it is." Um, and they have a blast playing in a field for a little bit, which is really, really sweet. All of the wolves are adorable. The way TJ Klune writes like the wolf behavior is very cute and very sweet. I quite like it. But and then it just continues as they grow. Like it follows them like through the years of high school. Carter and Kelly are so protective over Ox because Ox was getting kind of bullied because people think he's dumb and he's stupid and all of this other mean stuff. So Ox was getting bullied, and Carter and Kelly will not put up with that shit. Don't mess with him. Do not mess with Ox. That's their brother. And eventually Joe gets to come to high school too, because Joe was being homeschooled before his first shift. He had to be homeschooled, but now that he is of age and he can go out into the world, he gets to come to school with Joe, or with Ox, Carter, and Kelly. And one of my favorite scenes in the whole book is Joe is getting picked on by some upperclassmen and they're being mean to him, and Carter, Kelly, and Ox all feel it. They feel the upset of Joe, and they come running to the bathroom, and Joe just starts beating the shit out of these kids that are bullying Joe.
Oh yeah.
And Carter and Kelly come in and they start doing it too, and they're like, "Give us your names. We need to know who you are. Names now." And the kids like all give the names, and Carter and Kelly are like, "If you touch a hair on my brother's head again, I'll fucking kill you." And I love Carter and Kelly. I love them so bad. And obviously they get in trouble. And Ox's mom, who at this point, she knows about the wolves. I feel she's been told by this point. So like she's close with the Bennetts as well. And like the Bennett parents, they're called in and they're like, yeah, so all of them are getting suspended. And Ox's mom is like, no, they're not. What about the ones who started all of this mess and who are bullying the 12-year-old? What happens to them? And the principal's like, oh, we'll handle that. Don't worry about that. And Thomas, alpha man that he is, says, we were going to donate so much money. He flexes the money on him real quick because the Bennetts are filthy fucking rich, mind you, by the way. Bennetts are filthy rich. And Thomas flexes the money and the principal folds immediately, and it's just like, actually they're fine. Nothing happens, no punishment needed. You're good. Bye-bye. It's the funniest scene in the fucking book. I love it. So it just follows them for a little bit through their teenage years. Ox is starting to come really close with Thomas, and his bond with Joe is growing and all of that good stuff. And Thomas and Joe, because Joe is meant to be the next alpha, go, have alpha to alpha time, teaching the young one in the woods. And eventually Ox gets to come along, which I feel was big foreshadowing. Big foreshadowing.
Yes, very much
Um,
so.
very much so. Uh, Thomas takes Ox out with Joe, and sometimes it's just Ox and Thomas, and they like talk and about the magic of the land and the woods and nature and all that good stuff. And Ox just is really becoming very bonded with this family. His mom is very close with Elizabeth, who is like the Bennett mom. I love Elizabeth. Elizabeth is one of the best characters in the book. Also, Ox's mom, best character in the book, and I'll stand by that. And eventually they start training how to fight because there are monsters in this world. The world is a terrible, cruel, awful place. And they're all training how to fight. And they're training they're training Ox. I keep doing it too. They're training Ox and they're training his mom to fight. And it's really awesome. It's such a cool scene of Ox talking about how his mom is progressing in the training. And like she's learning how to fight and really take care of herself, and she's running with the wolves too sometimes. Like she's really really doing well, and it's so cool to see. Gordo is still being a little bit of a negative Nancy, and he's like, Ox, I didn't want you in any of this, yada yada yada. Gordo, we know you're upset, it's fine. And on one of like Thomas and Ox's like little walks where they have a conversation, Thomas offers Ox, when he turns 18, to turn him into a werewolf if he would like. And there's a lot of emphasis on choice in this book, and Thomas says it is your choice to make. You are enough as you are now. You do not have to change for us. We love you as you are this way. This is your choice. If you'd like this, you don't have to do it, because you're perfect the way you are. And I love the emphasis of choice in this book. It's very sweet. It's really really nice. But Ox, he's like, you know what? I'll think on that. Thank you for the offer, man. I'll think about it. And it kind of comes up like once or twice later, like all of that. A couple people are a little annoyed that Thomas offered him the bite, or Gordo honestly is probably the only one that's a little annoyed that Thomas offered that to him, because Gordo doesn't really want Ox in his life. But all of the Bennets, there's an emphasis on how oh my god, how Ox is different. There's something about him that is so unique and so curious, and they love that about him, and they find him to be exactly what they need, like exactly how he fits just perfect to them in their family, and it's really really sweet. What else happens in this time frame before the mess?
That's kind of it. There's
Well,
okay, so
Ox realizes
yeah,
a lot.
this is when Joe turns 18 and he's walking around at Sunday dinner in like low-rise jeans.
Like it was like little tiny shorts or something, like
Yes.
little like fucking barely there inseam shorts, and like no shirt, and Ox is like, oh no, oh no, oh dear, oh no. And because this is also one of the funny scenes in the book, because werewolves can fucking smell everything on you, smell your pheromones, smell everything, can hear your heartbeat. Oh, he is clocked. He is clocked immediately. He runs away. Ox runs as fast as he can to get away from all of them, to go like calm himself down and try and like push the attraction down. And then he douses himself in vile cologne to try and like hide his scent. And he comes back, and Carter, of all people, who loves giving Ox shit, is the first one who's like, oh, this is what it is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because Carter realizes very quickly, and Carter's like, Ox, we all knew this was coming. Go fucking shower, get that nasty cologne off of your body, and come back. And so Ox does that, and he comes back to the dinner, and everyone around them starts to just really clock him. Just they're like, what's that smell? What's that smell? Maybe homoerotic tension. I don't know. And poor Ox. I feel if I was in this situation, I would just crawl into a hole and die, because everyone around him knows that he is now attracted to their 18-year-old son.
Yeah.
And Joe also then realizes it, and he's like, oh, I'm going to make your life hell. And starts teasing him and all of this stuff at dinner. And the family is there. They're all there. And Joe's like licking whipped cream off of his fingers and like all of this shit. And poor Ox is dying inside. And it's the funniest thing on the planet, because if it were me, I'm crawling into the void. You would never see me again. And so after Ox has this realization, Joe is now so set upon courting him correctly.
Yeah.
And he goes over to Ox's house and like sits down with his mom to ask if it was okay to court Ox. And the entire conversation is the most hysterical thing I've ever read. I fucking Joe comes over in a bow tie and like all dressed up really nice. It's so cute. And he's just like, Maggie, may I call you Maggie, who is Ox's mom? And she's like, yeah, you can call me Maggie. And he's just like, you know Ox over there? And she's like, I've heard of him. She's like, I would like to court him and give him the entire world and do everything for him. And there's a point where like Joe says something stupid because he is so overwhelmed. And Ox hears laughter outside of the window, and he looks outside, and there is the entire Bennett family just lounging on the grass, watching it all happen. And they're laughing so hard, and poor Ox just is like banging his head on the table or something. He's so embarrassed. And Joe continues his whole spiel because he keeps getting off track and keeps saying dumb shit. And at one point he mentions mounting. Favorite line that Maggie has ever said in this book. She's just like, I mean, you threw it out there like it was nothing. And so eventually Joe goes on a whole tangent and spiel of like, I think Ox is the best thing on this planet, and I want to give him everything he deserves because he does deserve everything. And Maggie like gets really serious for a second, and she's like, do you really mean that? And Joe says, absolutely, with my entire chest. Everything I've got, that's exactly what I mean. And Maggie's like, okay, then Joe and Ox, it's up to y'all. You have my support, whatever you want to do. We love Maggie. Maggie is the most supportive mom on this earth. On this earth. We have glazed over some of the best Maggie moments. Maggie is so everyone deserves a mom like Maggie. There's a point before this whole Joe conversation where Ox finally like comes out to his mom and is like, hey, so I think I like boys and girls. And she's like, okay. And Ox is like, are you not like surprised or upset? Or like, what's up? And she's like, the people next door are werewolves. You think you being bisexual is a fucking crazy thing to me? hush. I love you, support you, do whatever you need to do. And it's so, I love her so bad. She says it in a lot like sweeter, more supportive manner. I'm paraphrasing. Um, and so Joe and Ox, they get to go on a little date. And it is the most awkward date on this planet. These poor boys trying to go on their first date. And they're trying to have a nice, sweet little time. First and foremost, the restaurant they picked, the waiter is a guy Joe had a little bit of a fling with. His name's Frankie. All these hate Frankie. Frankie, shut the fuck up, actually.
Okay, Frankie is not the worst, but my favorite part of that is that Jessie is also there.
Jessie comes in, so Ox's ex-girlfriend comes in, who Joe does not like. Comes in, and she's like, oh my god, hi! What are you guys doing? And Joe just blurts out, we're on a date. And Jessie just goes, I fucking knew it. I called it years ago. I knew it. And Frankie says the same thing. Frankie's like, I fucking knew it, god damn it. And he's all mad and prissy, and he leaves. And, you know, it just becomes an absolute mess. And Joe starts to get kind of overwhelmed, and like the wolf is really starting to come out. So Ox is like, you know what? Let's go on a walk. Let's just go have a walk and talk. And that's what they do. They go have a walk and talk, and it's very sweet. Very, very adorable. Love that. And then everything is fucked for the rest of the book. There is no more joy and whimsy.
Okay, so that happens, and let's see. Okay, so Joe finally finds out. So, not Joe. Oh my god, I keep doing that. I don't know what's wrong with me. So, part of everything is that we know that Joe went through something terrible when he was a child. And that's pretty much all that Ox knows up until this point, other than the fact that I think Thomas or Elizabeth, someone tells him that when Joe brought Ox home that first day, that was the first time that any of the family had heard him speak in like almost a year, if not over a year, because of whatever happened to him. So at this point we find out what that was, and it was a man named Richard Collins who had been an alpha, and he'd done terrible things to his own pack members. They tore the alpha from his body, but he escaped before they could do anything more. So prior to this bullshit, Thomas and Richard had known each other. They were childhood friends. Thomas is one of the most powerful alphas in North America. And basically, Richard wants to be an alpha again, so he kidnapped Joe and did a lot of terrible things to him. And they eventually rescue him. It was 8 weeks that Joe was with Richard Collins. And that's why he stopped speaking. When they finally rescued him, he didn't say a word. He would have terrible nightmares, all this stuff. Ox is aware of like the nightmares and stuff, but Thomas tells him everything, the full story of what had happened. And they decide to be together, and that's fine.
That's a good time.
Okay, this is like the whole bite conversation. Let's see. I'm trying to get to where like the big bad really does happen. So they know basically that Richard Collins, I don't know if the Omegas have shown up at this point, but either way, so they're training to fight. We talked about that. Maggie has trained to fight Ox and all the Bennetts. Like, they train regularly, and part of why that is because Richard Collins is still alive and he's still out there, and there's always a chance for him to come after the Bennetts again. And there's also, he has ties with other people that are dangerous, namely Robert Livingstone,
Mm-hmm.
who is Gordo's father, which is a whole other can of worms. Either way, that's why they're training. And part of Richard Collins' things is using omegas. And in this context, omegas are wolves without an alpha. And because they don't have an alpha or a pack or a tether, they lose themselves to the magic and become feral. Either way, basically, Collins shows up and they were aware that they were coming, that Collins and the Omegas were coming, but they didn't know a ton of detail. And at this point, they have someone with them. His name is Osmond. I don't remember why he's there. He's there on behalf of, like, I guess, like, their government entity of the werewolves, to, like, monitor things or something. So Osmond is there. He's whatever. This is just a character that I need to mention for context.
My head is in fact in my hands.
Basically, his mom goes to get some clothes. So they're holing up at the Bennett house. And Ox's mom is like, I'm going back to our house to grab some clothes and I'll be back. And let's see. I said, you can't go alone. Osmond said, I'll send 2 of mine along with her. I said, okay. I said, okay, like it was nothing. Like it was absolutely nothing at all. Elizabeth and Mark were inside. Carter and Kelly were clawing and slicing at each other to my right. Gordo was checking the wards around town. Osmond was watching us move back and forth, but his eyes kept coming to me. I was something he couldn't figure out. He was cautious, curious, ever since the tone in my voice had caused his betas to tremble. We didn't talk about it, or at least I never heard him talk about it. I was distracted. I said, okay. And then his mom leaves. And he said, we were stronger than anything that could come at us, and if Richard Collins showed his face, it'd be the last thing he ever did. If Robert Livingstone came smelling of ozone and lightning, we would rip the magic from his skin, and he would be nothing more. This was a promise because of Joe, because of what he was to his pack, to the people like Osmond, to me. I was focused. I didn't ask the questions I should have. Why Gordo's father would be with Richard Collins, what they wanted, what they were after. Who the weakest link was, who would be the easiest to take out first, who would be torn away, who was kind and beautiful and not deserving of such a fucking cowardly act, a monstrous thing that... Mom said, I'll be right back. Osmond pointed at 2 of his betas and they followed my mother. They were big guys. I thought nothing of it. I knew something was wrong 20 minutes later. Mom was pack, she was, but it wasn't the same as it was with me. Basically, her bonds don't work the same, and so they can't sense her in the same, like, paranormal sense that they can sense Ox. Let's see. Hey, I said, how long? I said, how long have they been gone? Osmond frowned and said 20 minutes, thereabouts. I pulled out my phone, I sent a text. What's taking so long? And waited. I started to sweat, and then a response. Just finishing up, can you come help me real quick? And I said, sure, be right back. I told Osmond she needs some help. He said, Ox. I looked at him. Never mind, he said after hesitating.
Oh my god.
Rereading this? It's fucking bonkers.
It's
okay.
Vile.
So he goes to the house, and he feels like something's wrong. Mom? And a man said, hello. He was leaning against the counter near the sink. He was a tall man, a slender man, thinning brown hair, little wrinkles pronounced around his eyes, a sharp angular nose above even teeth. He was pleased. He said, Ox, isn't it? I took a cautious step because of wrong. Where's my mom? That was rude. I asked you a question. And then he says some things about asking, like, do you feel the pull of the wolf within you? Again, asking where she is. They keep going back and forth. Do you know who I am? No. That was another lie, Ox. Have they taught you nothing? Don't do this. Do what? Hurt her. Ah, well, of course, you can stop that Ox if you wanted to. How? It's simple, really. Give me Joe and Thomas Bennett, and I will give you your mother. You will call them and ask for them to come over here. I don't care what you have to say to get them here, just those two, and those two alone. If I even suspect you're trying to tip them off, I will paint the walls with her blood. So, obviously, this is Collins, and he's a piece of shit. He's the
He's a
worst.
scary fucking villain. He's so sinister.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And he
And so
is
like,
he
ugh.
he delivers on his cutthroat promises, and I think that's what makes him so scary, is that
Yeah,
like
he does not
I
shy away.
feel like a lot of times you'll have a villain like this who says all of these threatening things, but then nothing ever comes of it. So it takes away the edge of the character. But even previous to this, we know that Collins is willing to do some fucked up shit. He kidnapped and tortured a child. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities for him to do something to Ox's mother.
Yeah. And so like fucking so this is the worst scene. This is one of the worst scenes in the book. Ox is standing in the middle of his house and he can see into like his living room, and in his living room there's a bunch of omegas, and the betas that like came with Osmond, who like went with his mother, and his mother tied up on her knees with a gag in her mouth, and she's like very upset, obviously horrified, crying, sobbing, and like fucking Richard is like, you've got 30 seconds, get Joe and Tom here and we can make it work. You can have your mom, just give me them. And Ox will not like give them up. He's trying to reason with this guy, and you can't reason with this. You cannot reason with this kind of insanity. And Richard's like, well, kill the betas. And the Omegas just snap the necks of these Omegas. What the fuck did I just say? Snap the necks of these betas. These poor, like, random dudes didn't fucking deserve this shit. And so Richard's like, well, I'm serious, Ox. There are things I need, things that must be done before I can leave here. I will do anything to take what's mine and what's owed to me. Can't you see that? Ox, she's scared. This is your mother. You're not mated to Joe, not yet. You can find another. There will be a nice boy or girl for you down the road, but you can never have another mother. Ox, she's your only one. Please don't make me hurt her. I would feel so bad about that. I really would. And Ox is like really reckoning with himself, and he's like, yeah, she's my one and only, the only one I'd ever have. And Ox says, I'll go get them. I promise I'll get them and bring them back. And Richard sighed, Ox, that's not how this goes. And he sounded so disappointed, and he walked towards my mother. I looked at this is the line where I really started to crack and started to sob. He says, I looked at her and I was 7 again, or 6, or 5, and I was looking at my mommy, asking her what I should do, begging for her to tell me just what the fuck I should do, because it was all violet and blue and all I could see was red. And my mother looked back at me with those dark eyes. She was no longer crying. Her face was wet, as were her eyes, but tears no longer fell. There was fire and steel buried in a cold resolve, and she just looked at me, and I knew what she was doing. She was being brave and stupid, and I hated her for it. Because she was making the choice for me. She was saying goodbye. And basically, Mama Maggie goes out in a fucking blaze of glory. She hops up and tries to use her like all the training she's gotten to try and fight these Omegas. And she smiled at Ox before she moved, and Ox says it was grace, it was beauty, fluid like water and smoke. She coiled down and then rose up quicker than I'd ever seen her move before. And she like attacks the Omegas, and then except Richard's hand curved into black claws, and he raised his arm in the air. I remember the night of my 16th birthday when we danced in the kitchen, the way she'd smiled at me, the soap bubbles on my ear, how she had laughed. And as I pushed through the door to sing my family home, the hand of a beast came down across her throat. The floor was wet after and around her. The sound she made was wet in her throat. And she just falls and she dies. Mm.
So
And
all of this, okay, all of this happens. Now Ox is pissed. The pack shows up. They're freaking out. And basically they go after Collins. So the pack collectively and Gordo, they're going after Collins, and in this fight it's revealed that Osmond, who has been staying with them for like at least a month if not longer at this point, was basically a double agent for Collins, and he was in on it, and he's, you know, that's why he offered to have his beta sent to go help Ox's mom. And basically it's just revealed that he's a piece of shit. In this
fuck
fight,
Osmond. All my homies hate Osmond.
in this fight, Thomas Bennett is mortally wounded, and they manage to chase off Richard Collins. Osmond just like takes off, and Robert Livingstone never shows up because I think Collins was saying like, oh, he's here in like an effort to scare Gordo, but he never showed up. So Ox's mother and Joe's father have both just died.
A BOGO
And
deal. A parental death, if you will.
A parental death BOGO deal. You got 2 for 1. So now they are both dealing with the repercussion of this, and they're both angry. And the people who did this technically got away. Collins is gone. Osmond is gone. Nobody knows where Livingstone is. Everyone is upset and angry, and, you know, everything that you would be when your parent is murdered. Elizabeth is distraught, you know, like everyone is upset. And then now Joe is alpha. That's another thing. Thomas is dead, so now Joe is alpha. Which it's not, you would think it would be like by age, it's not. For some reason Joe just is alpha despite being the youngest Bennett brother. That's just how it is, I guess. I don't know. Let's see. Basically they're talking about wanting revenge. And this is Ox is saying, he took from us, he took part of our pack away, he hurt us, he took my mom, he's gone, we have to find him. We can't let this happen to anyone else. We can't let this happen again. We have to protect the others, and we have to make him pay. And that was it. Later, I would realize that was it. That was the moment we began to say goodbye. So...
And what a fucking rude thing to say, actually, to me.
So basically, after this, they kind of... whatever, they have like a back and forth, and then basically Joe is like, I'm taking Gordo and my brothers, and we're leaving to go find Richard Collins to kill him. And Ox is immediately pissed off. He's like, what do you mean? I'm going with you. You know, all this stuff. And Joe's basically like, no, you're gonna stay here with Elizabeth, his mom, Mark, and Mark. Like, you're gonna stay here with them. And I'm taking Gordo and my brothers. So basically Joe's mind is made up. He's not gonna change his mind at this point. And Ox is pissed, and he's like, fine, fucking leave then. Goodbye. So they leave, and they stay in touch through text messages for a while. And then at some point that communication just stops. And they are gone for 3 years. The pack is separated for 3 years. In this time, weird things are happening.
Weird things are happening. Well, because Gordo is gone, the shop guys were like, hey man, what the fuck? Where'd he go? And Mr. Joseph has cut contact, so Ox is like, I have to do what I need to do. And he decides to tell Rico, Chris, and Tanner the secret of the werewolves and the fact that Gordo was a witch and that there's magic out there. And, once again, they're all like, we should have seen the signs. Makes sense to me. Wild. But they start coming around the Bennett family, what remains of it, and start interacting, and they get to see them shift, and they get to see the wolves, and slowly but surely, the three shop guys are pack bonded. They become bonded with the pack, which is so sweet, so nice. I love that so much. And, in these 3 years, Elizabeth, in her grief, shifts into a wolf, and she stays that way for a very long time. Apparently, grief is easier to process as a wolf for them. And she stays that way for a really long time. And the longer you stay in the wolf, the harder it is to come out. And there comes a point with Ox coming to her and is like, we can't do this anymore. We need to start coming together because they're obviously not coming back for a while. We need to take care of ourselves and this pack. I need you to come out.
So basically, all this stuff happens. They bring the shop guys into the fold. A man named Robbie Fontaine shows up. Basically, he is sent by the higher alpha. Again, they have a weird, almost government agency who sends someone else, and obviously the pack is very wary because of what happened with Osmond, but Robbie is fine, and he also eventually becomes pack bonded, and he basically is going to leave the pack he was a part of to join what is now what is now half of the Bennett pack. All of this is happening, and basically they come to the realization that Ox is alpha. He is an alpha. He, despite not having a wolf, despite still being human, he is an alpha, and they have the same magic tie that the wolves have to each other with the humans. So it's not as easily accessible, but there are ties between them, and they can feel each other's emotions. They can sense where they are. All the same things that come with the wolf pack, but now has been extended to the humans. Technically, Jessie also gets kind of brought into the fold, although she doesn't know the full details until something happens and she gets taken and they have to rescue her or whatever. And then they tell her about it.
And she's pissed. She's pissed. She's the only one who asks questions. Once again, slay Jessie. She's the only one who's like, Ox, you're gonna sit your ass down and tell me everything, every detail. And I love her for that. And she's real as fuck. And she takes pack life so fast. She takes it so well. She starts training with everybody because all of the shop guys start to train and everything. She starts training too. She gets a spear. It's fucking great. Yeah. I love Jess.
So they again, basically Ox is alpha, and he is kind of struggling with it because he feels like Joe is gonna come back and be mad that technically now he's alpha. There is some weird stuff. Let's see. Whatever. Basically, he becomes alpha, and he's concerned that Joe is gonna come back and be mad about it. At some point, someone shows up who basically breaks into the shop. Ox is there. They have a back and forth. Basically, the part of the pack that is gone. So Joe, the brothers, and Gordo saved this man from Richard Collins and sent him back to Green Creek with a message. And the message was just not yet, and that's all he says. David King is the guy's name. He had been a wolf hunter. Basically he couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't kill them, so he was shunned from his clan. all this stuff. He also acknowledges Ox as an alpha, so clearly it's not just like something within the pack. There is like something magic about it, and that other people can sense it and know that he is an alpha. And then they come back, the ones that have been missing. 3 years, 1 month, and 26 days. So now the whole pack is together again. But now they're running into the issue of, well, technically they have 2 alphas, and so the pack is divided, essentially. And they have to... Well, Ox is pissed. They come back, and Ox is livid. He is still angry that he was left there for 3 years. He is angry that there's almost an expectation for things to just be fine when they came back. He's still mad that Joe made the choice in the first place. He's mad that Joe made the choice to not talk to them anymore. And in Joe's words, he says that they, like, didn't want any distractions, but he didn't tell anyone, any of the other 3 of them, that he was doing so. They just kind of were told later and just kind of had to be like, okay, I guess, like, that's, you know, whatever. No communication, no discussion. So Ox is pissed, understandably so. Joe is pissed because, I guess because Ox is mad. And he's like, well, you weren't there and you don't know and all this stuff. And this is the part of the book where I'm like, I feel like this could have been cut down quite a bit, because they have this back and forth for a while. They just keep going around about it. Robbie has the hardest time fitting in, because eventually, basically, they just have to get along. Even if they don't integrate, they have to get along. And Robbie gets into it a few times with Joe, and with, I think he gets into it with Carter at one point. But Robbie vaguely has feelings for Ox. Ox is in love with Joe, so it's like a weird, it's not even really a love triangle. It's just a weird thing where eventually Ox has to be like, okay, you need to knock it off. This is not, like, what's happening. Like, I'm always going to choose Joe, basically. So whatever, that happens. They're still arguing, and eventually Ox and Joe have another conversation where Joe basically is like, please don't make me leave. Like, he feels like he's going to be kicked out of the territory, or he feels like Ox isn't going to want him there anymore because Ox is alpha now. And so they have this whole scene where Joe is like begging, like, I don't care if we're romantically involved, I don't care if we're friends or allies or what, just don't make me leave. Especially because Ox is his tether. So, I mean, the pack is his tether, but, like, also Ox. And they're not, like, officially mated, but they might as well be. So, they have this whole conversation, and finally they kind of chill out, and they're still kind of going back and forth and arguing, and they kind of get over it, I guess. And they sleep together, kind of. Not in the typical sense, but they have sex. And basically from there they decide that they are going to integrate the packs together. Which is a little rocky at first, but they managed to do it. They basically announce it to everyone, and then they again have to talk to, like, this President Alpha or whatever from the government agency to be like, yes, Ox is a human alpha. Yes, we are ruling the pack together. Sorry if you don't like it, basically. So that happens. They basically are like, okay, we are integrating now. The humans feel the bond too. All this stuff. And then, so everything seems like it's fine. Yeah, there's a little back and forth of, like, integrating, and it's not going to be easy, but they're getting there. And then the big bad comes again. So the whole reason that they came back when they did is because they realized that Richard Collins is starting to circle back to Green Creek. And that's the whole reason that Joe and them came back, because they were like, okay, he's gonna go home, so we need to be home before he gets there. So that's the whole reason they go back.
And the whole reason they know he's coming back is because the entire time Joe and them were chasing Richard, he was killing off the King family, who the David King guy who came back and gave the message to Ox, killing off his entire family. Because apparently the King family is responsible for all of the bullshit that happened to Richard when him and Thomas were younger.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole reason Richard's crazed is because his entire pack and family were wiped out by human werewolf hunters. And so that would be the King family. So he's going around slaughtering them all, and David King is the last one left. And after David comes and gives the message to Ox, they found David King in pieces, and I quote that, it is pieces, with his head in the middle of the bed in a motel. And written on the walls was something like another fallen king. Um, and that's when they knew Richard was going to come back to Green Creek. And it was all coming back because they had assumed David talked. David talked about Ox and the fact that Ox was now a human alpha, which has really never been heard of before. And so that's why they come back. So they know Richard is coming. The threat of him looms, but they are more focused on trying to integrate their pack to like really be strong and be ready for if Richard comes and when Richard comes.
I mean, they're still training and everything. I think what they didn't anticipate was how the angle he decides to go with.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is what he says. So basically, him and Joe fall asleep together, and this is the end of the chapter. This was my family. These people were my pack. I would have done anything for them, which is why, when Richard Collins came again, he came for me.
Mm.
So basically, he gets a call from Richard Collins, and Collins is basically like, um, I want you to leave them now. We have much to discuss, you and I. Um, he basically is like, I need to talk to you by yourself, and basically reveals that they have kidnapped people who live in Green Creek. So they don't have any ties to the pack or anything, but these are people who live in the small town that they all live in, people he knows, who he's seen, that he sees at the grocery store all the time. Mr. Fordham from earlier, who comes into the shop and Gordo gives him discounts bigger than he really should, and all this stuff. And this is where shit starts to go downhill really fast because Richard passes the phone to Mr. Fordham, and Fordham is telling him, like, Ox, whatever he wants, do not give it to him. And on the phone, he kills Mr. Fordham so Ox can hear it. And he's basically like, there's all these other people here. If you don't come by yourself, I'm going to kill all of them. So Ox, being the person that he is like, all right. um, so he gets to spend a few hours with everyone. He spends time with the pack and Gordo and everyone and Joe eventually. And eventually he gets a text message that just says, you've had enough time. And so he gets up and he tells Joe that he is going to get Jesse, that Jesse got a flat tire. And he closes off his link to everyone else with the ties that they have. And basically, Richard Collins thinks that he can take like the alpha powers back from he can get them from someone else, which is part of why he was trying to kill Thomas and then Joe, and now he thinks he can get it from Ox, which is why he's telling Ox to meet him alone, and he knows Ox is human and thinks he's vulnerable. So basically he manipulates Ox into coming to see him alone. He goes, there is a bunch of people there, including a mother and her child. Richard has a bunch of Omegas with him. He has Osmond with him, who is now half feral. Um, all this stuff. They start fighting. Like, it's real bad.
It was rough. It's real bad.
Yeah, they start
And
fighting.
fucking Gordo appears.
Yeah, Gordo shows up, which is really the only reason that like anything happens. Gordo shows up in his truck. They manage to get the humans untied. They basically tell the mother of the child, like, take the keys. These are the keys to the truck. These are the keys to the garage, so the mechanic shop. Go there, lock the doors, do not fucking move. Basically, they get them out and they're fighting. Um, what the fuck does he say? Ox Ox tells Osmond that he's Richard Collins' bitch, and like no matter what, like this is gonna end badly for him. And this is when I bring up that line from Ox's dad. It's brought up a few other times, but this is the one that stands out to me. I moved quicker than I ever had before. I was fueled by sorrow and despair, by ire and that feeling. That goddamn feeling of my father, my daddy saying, "You're gonna get shit, Ox." Because here he was. Here was Richard fucking Collins proving my dad right. He was giving me shit and I wasn't going to take it now. I shouldn't have to begin with. Which is interesting, because when those lines first come up, most of the time he's like, yeah, and my dad was right, but I was still fighting through it. But this time he's like, no, I shouldn't have been given shit to begin with. Which I think is an interesting change. So they get the humans out, and basically, at one point, Ox gets like kind of fucked up, like he gets hit or whatever, and the ties open up again, and so they're coming. The pack is coming to get him, to save him, and he's freaking out because he doesn't want them to, because he's afraid for his pack. And so he takes this time to distract Richard Collins, and basically leads him to this collapsing bridge. And the way he everything is super emotional. You're like, is he gonna live? Where's the pack? What's happening? And so basically he goes out onto this bridge. He's got Osmond on one side of him, Collins on the other. There's nowhere for him to go. And he's basically like, come fucking get me. And so both Richard and Osmond run at him, like half shifted. And Ox's weapon of choice is a crowbar. So at the last second where they're both gonna get him, he drops to his knees and basically holds the crowbar like up, like flat, so that they basically impale themselves on the crowbar.
He kebabs these two fucking werewolves like it ain't shit, which is the best thing ever.
So he tries to, he kebabs them, he gets them, and then he's kind of like shit talking on them. It looks like they're both dying. He gets up, he goes to leave, and the bridge collapses. And he like falls, I think he falls down into it, like into the creek that's under the bridge. And he gets up, he's trying to climb out of like the creek, and he gets up to the top of the creek, and Joe is there watching him. And then he shifts back and he says, Ox, I thought. So I took a step toward him and said, no, it's okay. It's okay. I promise you he's done. It's done. I promise, Joe. I'm sorry. Please don't be mad. Please don't be mad at me. I'm sorry. The remains of the bridge were blown apart as half-shifted Richard Collins rose from underneath and landed in front of me, body bloodied and broken, claws extended. One hand landed on my shoulder and pulled me toward him. Alpha, he snarled in my ear. And then I was impaled by his other hand, claws slicing into the skin of my stomach, punching in until his whole hand was inside me. Joe screamed behind me. I'd never heard him make such a sound before. It broke my heart, even as Richard Collins tore his hand out of me. I coughed, unsure of what had just happened. I looked down. Blood was gushing out of me. Part of me was hanging out, a wet and red, meaty-looking thing. So he fucking like tears his guts out, which is insane imagery, and like that's fucking crazy. So everything is upsetting at this point, because now you're like, oh my god. Everyone's freaking out. Someone kills Richard Collins. Um,
Joe rips his head off.
yeah, Joe rips his head off and is basically like, "You're not gonna die. You're not gonna die." Um, Basically, he has no other choice. And the werewolf bite operates very similarly to like a vampire bite in most media, in that it activates like healing abilities. So Joe bites Ox and gives him a wolf.
Gives him a
Um,
wolf.
so Ox wakes up and he's like, "Oh, what the fuck is happening? What is going on?" Um, and basically realizes he's a wolf now, and he, goes out. Um, he can feel all the ties a lot more clearly with everybody, the human pack mates, the wolf pack mates, like all of it. He can like feel Gordo's like wards and stuff now, all of this stuff. Um, and then they're all sleeping around him, and Elizabeth is the one who's awake when he wakes up, and is basically like, "Chill out, like you're gonna wake everyone up. It's okay." Um, and then basically he knows that Joe's out there waiting for him, so he goes and he shifts, and we get to see. So we've kind of heard what like the wolf's like mental processes, because it's much more like base instinct than when they're human. So a lot of times it'll be like repeated words or like broken sentences, like not full thoughts or sentences, obviously because they're in wolf form. So now we get to see it from Ox's perspective of like the broken thoughts, the repeating words, the mental process of being a wolf, which is really interesting. Um the rest of the pack wakes up anyway and they come out to see him, and um one of them, I think maybe Rico, says, "Holy shit, Alpha, that is a gnarly fucking wolf." Yes, I am wolf. I am gnarly wolf. Why is he growling at us like that? Can't you feel it in the bonds? The witch said, laughing, which is Gordo. My witch. My witch. He's being a smug fucking bastard. He liked when you called him gnarly. So they have this whole back and forth, and then he goes to Joe, and he shifts out of it, and he almost throws up, because it's his first shift, and like it's never fun. Um, and he basically has to figure out how to control it, briefly, which, sucks. They go back and forth about what exactly happened. Basically, Gordo knew, and Gordo followed him because he knew something was going on, because it's Gordo. And I don't know if we ever clarified that, but Gordo is a witch. He used to be, so a lot of times a pack will have a witch that they work with, or like the witch is technically part of the pack. We don't exactly know why, but for some reason, Gordo had previously been the Bennett witch, and now he's not, which is why he had so many issues with um, Ox being friends with them. It had to do with that. So that's also part of how Gordo knew. Um, and yeah, they're fine. So now he's been turned. Um, he can feel everything a lot more than he could before, like everyone else's emotions. Um, and they have to tell the fucking werewolf government that he's turned. Um, and yeah, it's very cute. Um, the last little paragraph: "We had lived, we had loved, we had lost. Oh God, had we lost? But we were here now together, and maybe this wasn't over. Maybe there were still other things to come. Robert Livingstone, Alpha Hughes, all the monsters still out there in the world. That was fine, that was okay, because we were the goddamn Bennett pack, and our song would always be heard."
Ugh,
Uh,
it's
um,
such a powerful last paragraph, I think.
a powerful last paragraph. We do get a epilogue, which is basically just like a very brief sex scene, and Joe, um like mating biting uh Ox. So now like they're officially mates because they had the mate bite and all that stuff.
Mhm.
That's the end of the book.
And that is the end of the
Honestly,
book.
Maggie dying is probably the most emotional part of the book. The ending, them arguing is also like the scene where Joe is like begging to not be sent away. Ugh,
Hurt like
hurt.
nothing else.
Um,
Also, a scene that was semi glossed over that really got me bad, that really made me sob, is after Joe, or not Joe, after Ox like passes out, um, or as he says, and as I died, I smiled a bloody smile after like Joe bites him. He's kind of in this like limbo in a way, and it's just like the
oh
clearing in
yeah,
the woods that they would always go to, and out of the woods steps a big ass wolf, and it's Thomas. And um, oh God, um, Ox says, "I have a choice, don't I, to go with you?" And he looked at Ox, and but then he turns around and he can hear like the yipping and the barking and the howling of the pack back home. Um, or I could go back. Um, and then Ox again says, "My daddy told me I was going to get shit before he left. Did you know that?" And Thomas like whines, and he says, "He told me that. He said I was just a dumb old ox who was going to get shit for the rest of my life, but he was wrong. He was wrong because Joe found me and brought me to you. You gave me purpose. You gave me a home, a pack, and a family. You are my father in everything but blood." Oh my God, it makes my eyes water just now. And Ox feels the bond and like the threads stretched between him and Thomas even in death. Um, and Thomas whispers to him along the bond, and all he says is, "Take care of them for me, my son." And Tom Bennett leaned forward, pressed his nose to my forehead, and I said, "Oh." And then he wakes up, and that's when like he shifts for the first time. And that scene is the one that really made me sob. I don't know what it was about that scene, but it just had me in absolute shambles. Oh my God. To have all of that happen in the last 40 pages is genuinely the most insane thing to me. TJ Klune, what are you doing? What are you doing? 40 pages and you do that? Crazy work.
I do like the pacing of the last 40, like the last 40 pages is not my pacing problem. The It's all of the arguing because they kind of just go in circles for like what in my opinion is too many pages.
Too many chapters.
Um
Too many
but
chapters.
like the pacing of the last four, it's like gut punch, gut punch, gut punch, and then we get our happy ending. And it's great and we don't sit in it for very long, but I think that is just because of the nature of needing to get to the other books.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't sit in it for super long, but we know it's there. We know things are better. Um, and we have one major character death in the book. Two, sorry, there's two because of the two that happened back to back. Um, and they are very impactful and like plot relevant, and I think they're really well done. I think the way that Ox and Joe's traumas like continue to affect them throughout the entirety of the book is really well done. Um, I really like the werewolf stuff as far as like the magic goes and how it works, because sometimes werewolf mechanics are like, like they're not that great. But I do like the mechanics of this, especially with like there's born wolves and bitten wolves, and the way that like the alphas work because they have like sway over the pack. It's not just like you're in charge, so I'm listening to you. There's like a magic aspect of it. Um, the pacing is really good. I like the way that it feels like the book is split up into acts. The relationships between everyone is great. It's super emotionally impactful in a way that doesn't feel cheesy or manipulative. Um, it's queer and it doesn't feel like it's being pushed that way. Like it doesn't even feel like that matters that much in their relationship. They just happen to both be men, and that's
Mm-hmm.
just how it is. Um,
Yes.
Personally, like I said before, this is like a 4.5 out of 10 out of sorry, a four and a
Wolf.
half out of 5 for me. The pacing at the end with the arguing is the only thing that knocks it down a peg for me. Otherwise, beautifully written. I recommend this to everyone. It is so good. Everyone should genuinely read this book.
It was such a good time, even though a lot of it was spent sobbing, but it was a really, really good time to read. And personally for me, this is like I haven't read a fantasy series in a while, and so I'm really excited to get back into it with this series. Um, I'm very excited to see what the second book will have. And I'm excited to see what other relationships bloom between other characters. Um, I'm so excited to read more of TJ Klune's work. This is my first TJ Klune book, so I'm really intrigued to see what else he'll do. And I want to see how he's going to write Robert Livingstone and how he'll write him as a villain, because Collins was so fucking scary. We didn't even talk about the whole scene that it's just like italic on a text. It's italic text on the pages, and it's the phone conversation between Ox and Richard, and it is genuinely a bone-chilling conversation. So I'm excited to see how he'll write Robert. And I don't know when he'll show up in the series. Who's to say? So I'm excited to see what that'll bring. I agree. This is a 4 out of 5-star book for me. It is genuinely one of like the best I've read this year, and that we've read on the podcast. It's a damn good time, and I would absolutely recommend this to people. If you want a werewolf fantasy, with some gay sprinkled in, you would love Wolfsong. It's a really good time. Just be prepared to cry a little bit. Have a box of tissues on hand, just a little, and you'll be okay. But absolutely, 1000% love this book. So I think that wraps up all of our conversating for Wolfsong by TJ Klune. Friends and buddies and pals out there in the world, we are jumping straight to spooky season. Next episode, we're going into the Halloween times, babes. We have a double feature planned. We're going to read 2 books, and we're going to talk about them for the spooky month. We are going to read Tender is the Flesh by Augustina. Damn, I should have looked up how to pronounce her name. Just, look up Tender is the Flesh, you'll find it. And then we're going to read Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. And they're both like shorter books. One of them is a novella. Things Have Gotten Worse is a novella. So they are nice little easy bite-sized things to read. They are a little tough on the stomach, from what I remember.
We will put trigger warnings in the description and everything, so you don't need to be worried. But if you want to read along with us, I would recommend looking up the trigger warnings before you pick up the books.
Yeah. So we look forward to the spooky time Halloween double feature, and I hope you all look forward to it as well.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.